The courtroom was silent enough to hear a pin drop, but the tension was loud enough to shatter glass. In the defendant's chair sat Elias Cross, a man whose wrists bore the bruises of handcuffs placed there by the arrogant officer smirking 2 rows back. The judge was ready to bang the gavel and seal Elias's fate, dismissing his service as a lie. But then the heavy oak doors groaned open. The air left the room. A 4-star admiral, clad in full-dress whites, marched down the center aisle, his medals chiming like the bells of judgment. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at the cop. And that was when Officer Derek Miller knew his life was over. Master Chief Petty Officer Elias Cross retired, adjusted the rearview mirror of his 1969 Ford F-250. The faded blue paint, a stark contrast to the pristine manicured hedges of Oak Creek. He wasn't here for trouble. He was here for the memories. 10 years ago, before the ringing in his ears became permanent and the desert sand worked its way into his soul, he had promised his squad leader Tex that he'd check on his widow if things went south. Tex didn't make it back from the extraction point in the Helmand province. Elias did. Elias was a mountain of a man, 6'4" with shoulders that blocked out the sun. But he moved with the liquid grace of someone who had spent 2 decades learning how not to be seen. His skin was the color of deep mahogany, and his eyes, sharp and discerning, missed nothing. Today he wore a simple gray t-shirt, worn denim jeans, and a baseball cap with no logo, no trident pin, no Navy SEAL bumper sticker. He didn't advertise. He knew who he was. That was enough. He slowed the truck as he approached 412 Maple Drive. It was a sprawling colonial estate, far too big for a single woman, but Tex had come from oil money, and he wanted his wife Martha to be safe. Elias pulled to the curb, killed the engine, and sat for a moment. He reached into the passenger seat and picked up a small velvet box. Inside was Tex's Silver Star, finally approved by the Department of the Navy after years of bureaucratic red tape. Elias had fought harder for this medal than he had in some firefights. As he stepped out of the truck, the humid Virginia air hit him. He took a breath, centering himself. Just drop it off, pay your respects, and leave, he told himself. Don't stay for tea. Don't let her see the ghost in your eyes. He was halfway up the walkway when the chirp of a siren cut through the suburban quiet. Elias paused, not turning immediately. He checked the reflection in the bay window of the house. A cruiser, sleek and black with Oak Creek police, stenkled in reflective gold, had pulled up aggressively behind his truck, blocking it in. He turned slowly, keeping his hands visible. This wasn't a combat zone, but his heart rate didn't spike. It actually dropped. Condition yellow to condition orange. 2 officers emerged. The driver was a man in his mid-30s. Officer Derek Miller. He had the bulky, pumped-up look of a gym rat who skipped leg day with a buzz cut that was trying too hard to be military. His hand was already resting on his holster. The passenger was younger, a woman, maybe 22. Officer Mina Jenkins. She looked nervous, her eyes darting between Elias and her partner. Stay right there. Miller barked, his voice cracking slightly with adrenaline. Hands where I can see them. Elias didn't flinch. He slowly raised his hands to chest level, palms open. My hands are visible, officer. Is there a problem? I asked you to stay there. Miller closed the distance, his stride arrogant. He stopped 5 feet from Elias, looking him up and down with a sneer that Elias had seen on the faces of warlords and petty dictators 1,000 times. We've had reports of a suspicious individual casing properties in this neighborhood. You don't look like you live here, pal. Elias kept his voice even, the deep baritone calm and controlled. I don't live here. I'm visiting a friend, Mrs. Martha Higgins at 412. Miller laughed, a harsh barking sound. Mrs. Higgins, the widow. I know Mrs. Higgins. She doesn't have friends like you. Elias saw the micro-expressions. Disgust, bias, a desire to dominate. Miller wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for a fight. I have identification in my back pocket. I can show you. Don't you move, Miller. Snapped, unclipping his taser. Jenkins, pat him down. Check for weapons. These types always carry. Jenkins hesitated. Derek, maybe we should just ring the doorbell and ask Mrs. Higgins. I gave you an order, Jenkins, Miller yelled, never taking his eyes off Elias. He's a suspect in a high-priority neighborhood. Do your job. Jenkins approached Elias cautiously. Sir, I'm going to have to pat you down. Please turn around and interlace your fingers behind your head. Elias complied slowly. He knew the law better than they did. He knew this was an illegal stop. No probable cause, just profiling? But he also knew that resisting on the street was a good way to get shot. The battle would be fought in a courtroom, not on Mrs. Higgins' lawn. As Jenkins patted his waist, she felt the hard ridge of a scar on his lower back. Shrapnel from an IED in Fallujah? She paused, then moved to his pockets. She pulled out his wallet. Open it, Miller commanded. Jenkins flipped it open. Driver's license, Elias Cross. Address is a P.O. box in D.C. Homeless, Miller spat. Drifter? There's something else, Jenkins said, squinting at a card tucked behind the license. It was a standard Department of Defense retiree ID, but the rank code E9 and the warfare insignia were distinct. He's military, retired Navy. Miller snatched the wallet from her. He glanced at the ID and scoffed. Fake. I've seen these sold at pawn shops downtown. You really think a guy looking like this was a Master Chief? Do you know how rare that is? He threw the wallet onto the grass. Turn around, Cross. Elias turned, his face stone. Officer, that is a federal identification card. Discarding it is a violation of shut up. Miller shoved Elias hard in the chest. Elias didn't budge. It was like shoving a statue. Miller stumbled back a step, his ego bruised. That's it, Miller hissed. Assaulting an officer. You're done. I didn't touch you, Elias said quietly. You aggressively postured, Miller shouted, grabbing his handcuffs. Turn around. You're under arrest. Elias looked Miller in the eye. The air around them seemed to drop in temperature. Officer, I am asking you to reconsider. I am on a mission of personal importance. If you arrest me, you are setting in motion a chain of events you cannot control. Is that a threat? Miller's face turned red. Resisting arrest, Jenkins, get his other arm. They wrestled his arms behind his back. Elias could have dismantled both of them in 3 seconds. He could have broken Miller's wrist and used Jenkins as a shield before they could draw a breath. The muscle memory twitched in his triceps, the deadly training screaming to be unleashed. Stand down, sailor, he thought. Stand down. The handcuffs clicked. They were tight. Too tight. Miller wrenched Elias's shoulders upward, a pain compliance move designed to hurt. You're making a mistake, Elias said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than Miller's shouting. The only mistake was you coming to Oak Creek, Miller grunted, shoving Elias toward the cruiser. As they marched him down the path, the front door of 412 Maple Drive opened. Martha Higgins, frail but sharp-eyed, stepped out. Elias, she called out, confused. Is that Elias Cross? Mrs. Higgins, go back inside, Miller yelled over his shoulder. We caught this prowler trying to break in. Break in? Martha looked horrified. He's my husband's best friend. Unhand him this instant. Miller paused, looking from the old woman to Elias. For a second, doubt flickered in his eyes. But then he looked at the neighbors gathering on their porches, phones out, recording. He was too deep in. If he backed down now, he looked weak. He had to double down. He's under arrest for assaulting an officer and resisting. Mom, if you interfere, you'll be charged with obstruction. Miller shoved Elias's head down and forced him into the back of the cruiser. The door slammed shut, sealing Elias in the cage. The smell of stale coffee and plastic filled his nose. Through the wire mesh, he saw Miller picking up the velvet box Elias had dropped during the scuffle. Miller opened it, looked at the silver star, and laughed. He showed it to Jenkins, shaking his head, mouthing the word stolen. He tossed the medal, a medal for which Tex had bled out in the sand, onto the dashboard of the cruiser like it was a piece of trash. That was the moment Elias Cross decided he wasn't just going to fight this charge. He was going to destroy Derek Miller. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. He didn't need a phone call yet. He needed to wait. He knew the protocol. When a SEAL of his clearance level was detained, flags were raised. But Miller hadn't run his prints yet. Take me to the station, Elias said to the empty air. Let's see who breaks first. The car jerked into motion. As they drove away, Elias watched Martha Higgins weeping on her lawn, clutching her chest. Miller turned up the radio, drowning out the silence. He thought he had just bagged a thug. He had no idea he had just handcuffed a ghost. The Oak Creek precinct was a bustling hive of fluorescent lights and ringing phones, smelling of floor wax and cynicism. Officer Derek Miller paraded Elias through the bullpen like a trophy buck. He pushed Elias roughly toward the booking desk, making sure the other officers saw. What do you have there, Derek? Asked Sergeant Kowalski, a weary man behind the high desk who had seen it all and liked none of it. Aggravated assault on a police officer, resisting arrest and possession of stolen property, Miller announced loudly. He slammed the velvet box containing the silver star onto the counter. Caught him prowling Mrs. Higgins' place. Claims he's some high-speed Navy SEAL. Miller snickered. Also claims this medal is for a friend. Stolen valor? Sarge textbook. Kowalski looked at Elias. He saw the stillness. Most PERs were screaming, crying, or bargaining by now. Elias stood perfectly balanced, his eyes scanning the room, assessing exits, weapon locations, and threat levels. It unnerved Kowalski. Name? Kowalski asked. Elias Cross, Elias replied calmly. Take him to print and mug, Kowalski sighed. Then box one. I don't want a circus, Miller. In the processing room, Miller took pleasure in the small indignities. He wrenched Elias's fingers onto the scanner glass harder than necessary. You think you're tough because you're big, Miller taunted, staring at the computer screen, waiting for the results. I eat guys like you for breakfast. You're going to prison, Cross. And in there, that quiet, tough guy act won't save you. Jenkins stood by the door, looking uncomfortable. Derek, shouldn't we call Mrs. Higgins? She was really upset. She's a confused old lady, Jenkins. She's probably being scammed by this guy. We're doing her a favor. The computer beeped. A red box flashed on the screen. It didn't show a rap sheet. It didn't show a driver's license history. It displayed a single flashing prompt. Restricted access? Biometric mismatch. Identity shielded. NavSpec were Group Dev Group. Contact DoD Provost Marshal immediate? Miller frowned. He hit the refresh button. Stupid machine. It's glitching. What does it say? Jenkins asked, stepping closer. It says identity shielded. Probably a glitch in the DOJ database. Or Miller turned to Elias with a dark grin. Or you've got some fake identity set up that's confusing the system. Is that it, Cross? You a hacker too? It means you don't have the clearance to view my file, Elias said. And it means a silent alarm just went off at the Pentagon. You have about 10 minutes to uncuff me and apologize. Miller laughed so hard he nearly choked. The Pentagon? Listen to this guy. He thinks the Pentagon is watching the Oak Creek booking station. Miller canceled the alert manually, overriding the system prompts. I'm booking you as John Doe until you give me a real ID. Let's go. He dragged Elias to Interrogation Room 1, a small windowless box with a steel table bolted to the floor. He shoved Ellis into the chair and cuffed one hand to the table ring. Miller sat opposite him, leaning in. Here's how this works. You sign a confession admitting you pushed me, admitting you stole that medal, and I might put in a good word with the DA. So you only do 5 years instead of 10. Elias looked at the two-way mirror. He knew someone was watching. I want my phone call. You get a call when I say you get a call. Miller slammed his fist on the table. I am invoking my right to counsel, Elias stated, and I am informing you that you are currently violating Article 31 of the UCMJ, applicable to you because you are detaining a retired service member on federal business. You aren't on federal business. You're a bum in a truck. Miller stood up, pacing. You know what? Fine. Make your call. Who are you going to call? Your fence? Your drug dealer? Miller threw a precinct phone onto the table. Elias picked up the receiver. He didn't dial a local lawyer. He didn't dial a bail bondsman. He dialed a number from memory, a number that hadn't changed in 20 years. Operations? A crisp voice answered on the first ring. Authentication echo, Sierra 94 Broken Arrow, Elias said. His voice was different now. Cold command level authority. There was a pause on the line. Authentication confirmed, Master Chief. What is your status? Detained by local law enforcement. Hostile. Oak Creek, Virginia. Unlawful arrest. Secure items seized. 1 Silver Star posthumous award belonging to Lieutenant Texas Higgins. Understood, Master Chief. Holding pattern, do not engage. Help is inbound? ETA for JAG is 0800 hours tomorrow. Stay safe, brother. The line clicked dead. Elias hung up and looked at Miller. It's done. Miller rolled his eyes. Echo Sierra Niner. What a load of crap. You're crazy. You're actually insane. Miller snatched the phone back. Enjoy the night in the tank, Master Chief. Miller stormed out, leaving Elias alone in the silence. Elias closed his eyes and began to meditate. He needed to lower his heart rate. The war had just begun. The next morning, the sun bled through the blinds of District Attorney Marcus Narina's office. Narina was a man who viewed the law as a ladder, and he was climbing fast. He had perfectly coiffed hair, a suit that cost more than Miller's car, and a re-election campaign coming up in 3 months. So what do we have? Narina asked, sipping his espresso. Officer Miller stood at attention, though he looked tired. Solid case, sir. Triant male, Elias Cross, prowling in Oak Creek. When confronted, he became belligerent, assaulted me, shoved me in the chest, and resisted arrest. We also found a stolen Silver Star medal in his possession. Stolen valor? Narina's eyebrows shot up. In a military town like this, that's red meat for the voters, Derek. People hate that stuff. Exactly. Miller nodded eagerly. He claims he's a retired SEAL, but his prints came back with some weird error code. Probably expugned records from a dishonorable discharge. The guy is a phantom. Any footage? Body cam malfunctioned during the initial scuffle. Miller lied smoothly. Battery issue, but Jenkins saw it all. She'll corroborate. Narina tapped his pen on the desk. Good. We fast-track this. Arraignment at 10 a.m.? Judge Harrison is presiding? He hates cop haters. We asked for max bail, flight risk, danger to the community. One thing, sir? Miller hesitated. He made a phone call, spouted some military gibberish. Probably nothing, but ignore it. Narina waved a hand dismissively. These drifters always try to sound important. I'll see you in court. The courtroom. 9:55 a.m. The Oak Creek courthouse was packed. Word had spread, likely leaked by Miller himself, that a stolen valor case was on the docket. Veterans from the local VFW sat in the back rows, arms crossed, ready to scowl at the imposter. Elias was led in, wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too short for his legs. He was shackled at the wrists and ankles. He walked with his head high, scanning the room. He saw the angry faces of the veterans. He didn't blame them. They had been fed a lie. He looked for his lawyer. The court-appointed public defender, a nervous kid named Tim, was shuffling papers. Mr. Cross? Tim whispered, sweating. Look, they're playing hardball. Narina is asking for $100,000 bail. I think if you plead guilty to the misdemeanor resisting, we can drop the assault and the theft. No deals, Elias said. But Mr. Cross, you have no alibi, no witnesses. I have the truth, Elias said. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Harrison swept in. He was an older man with a face like a dried apple and a reputation for harsh sentences. He sat down and glared at Elias over his spectacles. Docket number 4421, the People versus Elias Cross, the clear announced. Mr. Narina, Judge Harrison grumbled. What is this? Another vagrant disturbing the peace? Much worse, Your Honor. Narina stood up, buttoning his jacket. This man not only assaulted a police officer in the performance of his duties, but he was also found in possession of a stolen military decoration, a silver star. He has refused to identify the true owner. He is mocking the sacrifice of our armed forces. A murmur of anger went through the gallery. Disgraceful, Judge Harrison muttered. Mr. Public Defender, how does your client plead? Tim stood up, shaky. Not guilty, Your Honor. Very well, Harrison said. Given the nature of the charges and the defendant's lack of ties to the community, the people request bail set at the double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were thrown wide. The sound was heavy, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. Every head turned. Walking down the aisle was not a lawyer. It was a woman in a sharp navy blue pantsuit flanked by two shore patrol officers in pristine dress uniforms. She carried a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. Who are you? Judge Harrison barked, banging his gavel. You can't just barge in here. The woman stopped at the bar. She didn't look at the judge. She looked at Elias and gave a barely perceptible nod. Then she turned to the bench. Your Honor, I am Captain Elelenena Vance, Judge Advocate General's Corps, United States Navy. I am here representing Master Chief Petty Officer Elias Cross. Narina laughed. The Navy sent a JA for a drifter. Is this a joke? I assure you, Mr. Narina, the United States Navy does not joke, Vance said, her voice cutting through the room like a razor. And neither does the man you have shackled like a common criminal. Miller, sitting in the front row, felt a cold bead of sweat roll down his spine. He looked at Jenkins. She was pale. Your Honor, Vance continued, I have a motion to dismiss all charges immediately with prejudice. Furthermore, I have a writ of habeas corpus and a federal order to take custody of the defendant and all evidence seized, specifically the silver star belonging to Lieutenant Texas Higgins. You can't just take over my courtroom, Captain. Judge Harrison shouted, his face turning purple. This is a state matter. This man assaulted a police officer. Did he? Vance opened her briefcase. Or did Officer Miller assault a decorated war hero who was delivering a medal to a Gold Star widow? Objection. Narina yelled, Hearsay. I have the affidavit from Mrs. Martha Higgins. Vance held up a document. Who witnessed the entire event and was threatened with arrest by Officer Miller if she intervened. The gallery gasped. The veterans in the back row uncrossed their arms, leaning forward. The mood in the room shifted instantly. That's a lie, Miller blurted out, standing up. She's senile. Sit down, officer, Harrison snapped. Your Honor, Narina stammered. This is highly irregular. We need time to review this. You don't have time, Vance said, because I'm not the only one who came today. She turned and pointed to the back of the room. The doors opened again. This time there was no sound, just an overwhelming presence. A man stepped into the light. He was older, his hair silver, his posture rigid. He wore the dress white uniform of a United States Navy Admiral, 4 stars on his collar, a rack of medals that covered his chest. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. Even Judge Harrison froze. Admiral William Bulldog Archer walked down the aisle. He stopped right next to Officer Miller. He looked down at the cop with eyes that were cold, blue, and absolutely terrifying. Miller shrank in his seat. He looked at the Admiral's shoulder boards. 4 stars? This wasn't just an officer. This was a god of war. Admiral Wrecker didn't say a word to Miller. He walked past the bar, ignored the bailiff, and stood next to Elias. Master Chief, the Admiral said, his voice deep and growly. Elias stood despite the chains. Admiral. Sorry I'm late, Elias, the Admiral said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Traffic in D.C. is a nightmare. He turned slowly to face the judge. Your Honor, the Admiral said, I am Admiral William Riker, Vice Chief of Naval Operations, and I am here to personally testify to the character of Elias Cross and to ask why my best sniper is in chains. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the vacuum before an explosion. Admiral Riker stood by the defense table, his presence dominating the room in a way that made the judge's bench seem lower to the ground. Judge Harrison cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses with a trembling hand. Admiral Riker, while this court respects your rank, this is a municipal matter. The defendant is charged with assaulting a police officer. With all due respect, Your Honor, Riker said, his voice smooth but hard as granite, this is not a municipal matter. It is a matter of national security and federal law. The Admiral turned to face the gallery, then pivoted to look directly at District Attorney Narina. You called him a drifter, Rekha said, pointing a gloved hand at Elias. You called him a vagrant. Let me correct the record. Riker began to pace slowly in front of the jury box. Master Chief Elias Cross served 22 years in the United States Navy. He was a member of SEAL Team 6 Development Group. He has completed 12 combat deployments. He holds the Navy Cross, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, and 2 Purple Hearts. Rekha stopped and looked at Officer Miller. Miller was staring at his shoes, his face a mask of panicked sweat. The reason his fingerprints triggered a security alert, Riker continued, his voice rising slightly, is not because he is a criminal. It is because his biometric data is classified level 1. His identity is shielded to protect him and his family from the enemies he made while protecting you. Raker leaned onto the prosecution's table, looking down at Narina. You have a hero in chains, Mr. Narina, and you are trying to destroy him for a headline. Narina tugged at his collar. Admiral, that is all well and good. But past service doesn't excuse current crimes. Officer Miller stated that Mr. Cross was aggressive and the medal, Riker interrupted. The stolen Silver Star. Yes, Narina said, finding a shred of confidence. He had it in his pocket. He couldn't prove ownership. Stolen valor is a serious offense.